And we're live. Hello, everyone. This is Kevin, your Apptrepreneur. Thank you for joining us at the Apptrepreneur Show. It's been a few weeks since we've done an episode, but this is where we talk about tech, pop culture, and life in between. And even though it is Friday at 9:39 p.m., we have a special guest. We have... Who the heck are you?
Who? That's insulting. Don't you recognize me, Kevin?
Mr. Rogers.
That's right. No, we used to do it. We used to do a YouTube show together.
Oh, that's right. Oh my gosh, that is right. I believe it was yeah, it was Space-rific Reviews. This thing in 2009.
Yeah, I looked up the last movie we reviewed. It was 2011.
Oh wow. That yeah, that's a while. So for anyone who doesn't know what this is, when me and Marco had the brilliant ideas because we thought we were being extremely clever, we decided we were going to try to be the next Siskel and Ebert. And the whole shtick was, as you can kind of see without us actually showing anything, I was oh my gosh, we're so much younger back then. This is almost embarrassing.
Yeah.
I was the stuck-up, well-dressed, snooty film critic, and he was the everyday person. And it was on a spaceship for some reason. I don't entirely know why. I think we just liked space. That was the whole thing.
Yeah. Just like the spaceship idea.
Right. So anyway, it's kind of a shame that it never took off because you know what? I Googled Space-rific and it really was a unique name. No one else has it. And maybe with some time, who knows, something could have happened. But then I got a job in Southern California and I moved, and he did some Confused Matthew style reviews for a while. Does anyone remember Confused Matthew? And then I think he moved on. In fact, you even renamed the channel to Hair Fight. Yeah, which is awesome. Yeah. But this episode, September 12th, 2009, 93 views. This episode is more than 10 years old, and that's the best we could do. So, I think we are both much happier with what we are doing right now.
It was a good try. It was fun. In retrospect, anytime I've looked at those videos, though, I'm always like, we should have got a microphone. That's like the dumbest thing ever. So we just use the onboard microphone for the camera, and it's just
I've learned.
Gotta have a microphone.
Yeah, no. One of the lessons that I learned it a little late, but not too late, was if you're going to invest in your YouTube channel, invest in the audio first, then the video, because the audio, no one's going to want to watch it if the audio is terrible. But they will watch it if the video is poor, but the audio is good. And since this is a podcast, which means you can watch it on YouTube, or ironically, you can listen to it on Spotify, which is going to be ironic, as you will find out why in a minute. So yeah, the audio is very important regardless of that. So, and anyway, I've actually wanted to have Marco on the show for a while. We have these super long conversations on the phone, and we've actually mentioned a few times we should really be recording this and putting it on YouTube or something.
That's probably a good idea,
Yeah, so we're going to actually see if that idea works out good in practice as it does in theory. But for those of you who are new and you happen to like the show, if you do us a favor, hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and leave a comment below. Now, for the first episode that you came over, I definitely wanted to talk with you about this topic. And I actually contemplated a few times doing a few solo videos because this was like a very explosive topic in the tech world, but it also infused politics and discussions of censorship and free speech, and you can't just get anyone in here. So I figured you would be a good person to discuss this with, and that would be this absolutely crazy thing that's going on with Spotify and Joe Rogan. Now, I'm selecting this picture because that's a cool picture.
For those of you who are listening, is that
for those of you who are listening?
Oh, sorry,
that's a super villain. Yeah,
I was gonna say the super villain in the back. Is that the Spotify guy? Is that what he looks like?
That's the CEO of Spotify. Apologies to those who are just listening to this and can't see it, but hopefully you can see it in the thumbnail. I'm going to make that the same thing. But yeah, that's what the Spotify CEO looks like. I'm almost tempted to remove the Lex Luthor moniker from Jeff Bezos and give it to him. But I don't think this guy is quite as evil as Bezos. So Bezos gets to stay Lex Luthor. Now, this article is paywalled, so we can't actually read it. But that's fine because we don't want to read someone else's opinion. We want to share our opinion on it. And I'm going to kind of just briefly go over what this was all about. Now, Joe Rogan is he's a podcaster. He kind of does what we're doing right now, except he's $100 million more successful at what he does. That's true. Now my chinchilla is running on the wheel. If you hear like a wobbling, that's the chinchilla on the wheel, folks. But anyway, Joe Rogan's podcast just exploded in popularity. And one of the reasons it exploded in popularity, from my opinion, is that he was not afraid to talk to anyone. He will have anyone on his show if they will come on. And he's not afraid to talk about topics that go against the grain. And he kind of does it in a way that, from my perspective, is a way that the average American can relate to. Like, he's rich beyond belief right now, but he's, as people would say sometimes when they're voting for their political candidates, he's someone I'd want to have a beer with. That's what they would say about Joe Rogan. And he's been very successful at it, but he started dipping into the waters of the vaccines, which, I mean, getting into the vaccine debate is a surefire way to stir the pot and potentially gain or lose subscribers. And he has been accused of spreading vaccine misinformation. Now, first of all, have you listened to anything he said about the vaccines personally?
Yes. Yeah, I listened to what he said about. I listened to the 2 episodes that got him in trouble too. I don't think I listened to all of them, but I listened to a good portion of them.
Right. Now, just so that everyone is aware of where I stand, even though most of my subscribers already know, my stance is get your damn shot. Just get vaccinated. It's not that, it really should not be that big of a deal. But that said, with that being my stance, I also listened to the episodes. And the only thing that I really took issue with Joe Rogan that I would consider to be, I disagreed with information that his guests were saying and what he was saying. But the only thing that I found personally offensive was when he said, like, look, if a 21-year-old asked me whether I should get vaccinated or not, I would say no. And my thought is, well, who the heck are you to say that? Why would anyone be asking you if they should get vaccinated? You're not a doctor. You're a podcaster. That was the only thing that I felt was like really out of line. Otherwise, I'm actually a little surprised that the episodes gained the my whole thing is, if people were listening to it, he wasn't spreading misinformation. He had very educated, people on the show, people who are definitely smarter than you or I.
They're actual doctors, yeah.
Yeah, they're actual doctors, but these aren't quack doctors that think that we were aliens that we came on the backs of alien crystals or something like that. These are doctors who actually deal with, the stuff that vaccines are made from, and they expressed some concerns. And even though I don't share those concerns, you know what? You are allowed to have those concerns, and you are allowed to voice those concerns.
Apparently not.
Well, here's where it gets really interesting, because apparently I don't even know how many regular everyday people were even offended by this show.
Nobody.
Until Neil Young, an artist whose music I do like. I like Neil Young's music, I do. But just like Eric Clapton, he seems to have gotten a little silly in the head the older he gets. Neil Yeah, Neil Young, who was, by the way, here's something funny I want to say about Neil Young before we continue, and I think you might agree. Neil Young might be a classic artist. He might have many great albums, all that jazz. At modernly speaking, he has not been culturally relevant for a while. He's known more for his works in the past than he is for anything he's doing now, right?
Yeah, Neil Young is the best that the mainstream media could get to smear Joe Rogan with. Like, that was it. Like, they were like, oh, Neil Young wants to pull his music. I read because it comes up in 100 stories that you're like, Neil Young's pulling his music from Spotify, and immediately it's just like, okay, who gives a shit? Like, why would anyone care? It's Neil Young. Like, he's not relevant in any capacity. That's not to say he can't, or that I care all that much that he did. It's just like, it's a thing where the media wants to play it up more than it's valuable.
Right. Neil Young, as great as he is, he's great. We're not going to deny that. We're not hating on Neil Young, but he hasn't had a best-selling record for a long time. So
he's a grumpy old man. He's a grumpy old rock star man. That's fine.
Yeah.
Who sold his catalog, or at least 50%.
Yeah, he also sold his catalog. He realized he doesn't
like everybody.
Like everybody. A lot of the classic artists are starting to sell their catalogs because they're not making a lot of money anymore, and the catalog in the streaming age isn't worth as much. But anyway, he made a big deal. And by the way, it should be noted, Neil Young could not unilaterally decide to do this. He had to get permission from Warner Brothers, who I think he sold the catalog to Warner Brothers. But
if I remember right, I thought he sold it to some hedge fund or something, because that's what they're doing. All the rock stars are getting their catalog, they're selling it for a large amount of money. Like Bruce Springsteen, I think, sold his, or Neil, what's his name, Bob Dylan sold his for like 300 million, and they're just selling them to somebody who's going to put them on all these things to play them over the next 10 years or whatever it is that makes them money. And so it's at that point, I don't know the legality of it. Do you own it anymore? Do you get to make decisions about it? I think other artists have said they don't get to.
Well, I read, and this sounds like it's right, that basically Neil Young still had to go through whoever owns the masters, aka the record label, and the record label had to agree to do that. Now, the record label did agree to do that, and that's also, by the way, why you don't see a lot of other artists pulling their music from Spotify as well. There was a couple artists, and their names escape me at the moment, where they said they were going to do everything they could to get their music taken off Spotify, and it hasn't happened yet.
Well,
but here's like the really interesting thing about Neil Young, and this was like the first reason I wanted to kind of talk about this. Neil Young, I recall, was threatened to have his music pulled from certain radio stations back then because he was a hippie, if you will. And he was one of those people that parents thought that his music was corrupting the kids, much like they thought Elvis and the Beatles were ruining culture. So you would think if anyone would have known that you don't make your point across by trying to get people removed from platforms, you'd think it would be him.
Yeah, well, at this point in their career, it's, her and Joni Mitchell there, who's also nobody gives a shit about. I'm like, compared to like the thing with that, you're correct about that. You wouldn't. It is a weird move to say, I want to pull my music because I don't agree with someone, and basically side with all the media companies. That's the thing here. Like, even if you hate Joe Rogan, and I'm not like a super fan of Joe Rogan or anything, I learned he had a podcast. Like, I remember he was on news radio, and so I was like, oh, this guy's a stand-up comic. I don't particularly like his stand-up comedy. I don't think he's super funny at it, or it's not my thing, at least. And I learned he had a podcast, and I saw he had sometimes famous people on it. So I have watched him over the years. And once people complained about this, I watched those couple of episodes. And it was like, okay, well, I'm an adult, so I don't really care who he talks to. I imagine that's how most people are.
Right. Yeah, no, so this was like a weird power move, but on the other hand, this isn't
Yes, that's what I was going to say.
exactly
If Neil Young wants to take his music away, all he's really doing is helping CNN or NBC. Like, it's on behalf of corporate people who hate him. Like, even if
Right.
you hate Joe Rogan, he should exist.
Well, he's also helping Fox News because it gives Fox News a reason to cry censorship. So he, in a sense, he's helping everyone but himself, which is
right.
really
And so it's a
funny when you
weird
think of it.
decision in that sense. Like, I don't like I think what people are trying to do, and I'm at least a little sympathetic to the idea, even though I don't think it matters either, is they're trying to do it for safety reasons. Like, Joe Rogan has basically had kooks on his show for a decade. Like,
Right.
that's kind of his thing. Like, he's just a little bit conspiracy minded, and he enjoys talking to people who love aliens or think the government's up to no good, and he talks those kind of things, or those kind of people. And so this isn't out of the ordinary. It's pretty normal. It's just that nobody cared until he got moved to Spotify, and then he became bigger than he was. And so
Right.
now he's a big threat. He gets 10 times the audience of a nightly newscast, or on a on your CNN or MSNBC or whatever. So everybody wants to take him out. You're not going to. You can kick him off Spotify. He'll just go somewhere else and take 11 million viewers with him.
Well, he's not going to get kicked off Spotify because Spotify CEO actually, because then, yes, Joni Mitchell did make a big stink about it. And then there was a couple podcasters who were not able to remove their podcast from Spotify, but they basically said, we will not be making new episodes until this situation is resolved.
Because I'm not super prepared for this, not knowing that, or at least I was prepared up to a point, and then I read something today that was saying that episodes of his show were being pulled off Spotify.
I know that they were. Let me look that up real quick. But
I saw that there was a long list of ones, and I haven't been on Spotify to check, but it looked like they were pulling episodes, or people were complaining that episodes were being pulled. So there may be this, we're going to poke the bear a little bit and hope that he gets mad and doesn't want to do it.
Yeah.
I don't know enough about that to know if that's what's going on.
Well, this is definitely like a little wrench in the story, because apparently they are removing more than 70 episodes of Joe Rogan's podcast, which this is interesting because originally Spotify CEO said that they had, vetted the episodes, that nothing had been done wrong. Let's actually see what this article says real quick. So you get to now see me make a video live. Spotify appears to have quietly removed roughly 70 episodes of Joe Rogan's podcast after expressing support for the comedian who stirred controversy for spreading COVID-19 misinformation. Yeah, I think misinformation is a good term for that. I wouldn't say it was outright conspiracy. He's no Alex Jones, that's for certain. The apparent removal of all episodes, all of which were recorded years before the pandemic began, so this probably isn't as related as they want to think it is, was spotted by JRE Missing. The fan-made website uses Spotify API to compare available episodes to a database of all episodes recorded. It's unclear when the episode stopped being available. Roughly 40 episodes had previously disappeared from Spotify. Okay, so you know what? Now that I see saying this,
ones were removed a day.
Yeah. Well, this was today. This was 5:26 p.m.
If you go to that website, it looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, a whole bunch of them had been removed today. It looks like other ones were removed previously.
Well, but there was episodes removed from Joe Rogan's podcast when it moved to Spotify because it did not meet their code of conduct. I don't know. Yeah. So this is probably a nothing story.
It seems to be if the website is accurate, the jremissing.com website, it looks like they removed a lot. Whatever the list was, 40. Wait, and they're ones that you'd think wouldn't be particularly. I mean, it's not like they're all crazy ones. It was him talking to Bill Burr or Andy Dick.
Yeah, there's so this is the list. Pete Holmes, They did remove Alex Jones and Milo Yiannopoulos. That's
They relieve. Yeah, well, I can
not a
see like
surprise.
not that I'm okay with that, but I can see them removing the more egregious ones, like
Yeah.
Stefan Molyneux, who's a terrible.
Oh yeah, that guy's
but
awful.
like Maynard Maynard from Tool, he's a singer. What did they discuss that possibly prompted that?
Right. Yeah, Dave Attell, Nick Thune. I don't even know who some of these people are.
Well, a lot of them are stand-ups.
Bill Burr. I do know who Bill Burr is. He's another guy Netflix refuses to remove, along with Dave Chappelle. Is Dave Chappelle on here? I don't know. But yeah, so some of them were removed today, but yeah, nothing.
I think all of them were. I think there was an initial list, and then several were removed today. They're all dated February 4th.
Well,
that aren't
the ones that are marked February 4th here. These are new, but the ones that are not marked, these had already been removed.
Yeah. I'm assuming those are the ones that were removed before it started or whatever that were mentioned. But that's more than half the list was removed today.
Right. Oh, I wasn't even sharing the screen properly. So anyway, yeah, here's what it looks like. So they actually, they have new, and then
yeah, that's quite a few that were taken off today, though. And I don't know what the pattern is. They can't possibly, unless it's just every time they mention the coronavirus. But that would be silly.
I don't even think these were all about.
Because some of them are real old.
Some of them are. Yeah, like here's like episode 4 that was removed today.
Well, he must have said something offensive. I saw something about him saying offensive things.
Well, oh yeah, he's a comedian. Like comedian saying offensive things is not.
Yeah, no, somebody was saying racist stuff. I saw it on the Instagram.
Oh yeah, I did read a story. So yeah,
and I watched the clip.
Here's just one of those the problems that I have with the internet in general right now is that when someone makes a mistake, they just go back and they just dig through everything they've ever done, and they find every little mistake. Yeah, like that people don't have anything better to do with their time. Well, anyway, I had to say, I kind of getting back on the main topic. I was impressed with Spotify's CEO, kind of like how I was impressed with Netflix's CEO defending Dave Chappelle. The thing about this is that that the people who are mad are on Twitter. Yes. And Twitter is not real life. Twitter doesn't even have that many users when you really get down to it. And yet all these companies are terrified of Twitter. So I always like it when basically these CEOs say in so many words, we're not bowing to the Twitter mob. We believe in freedom of expression, and we're not going to censor. And then people will come back and say, well, it's not a freedom of speech thing. It's, it's your platform. You can put who you want on there. You can choose not to put, and it's like, I don't know. It's like, it's kind of a crazy world that we live in.
Well, I thought about it today, and anybody who speculates about this on the internet doesn't know, of course, but my guess is that we interpret it as them bowing to Twitter when Spotify does this. It's actually probably like shareholder stuff. It's based on the shares drop, like the fact that they lost $2 billion in value. So then, because it's a matter of who do you have to please? The only person they have to please is the people who own stock in their company, and so they get antsy about it when it dips. And it's the same thing with Netflix. Like Netflix can say what they want, because Dave Chappelle's comedy specials are popular, and he's very popular as a person. So
yeah, the thing about the Spotify thing, like I read the reports, and you and me have talked about how the media can be a little dishonest, and I think the media was being very dishonest about that. Neil Young and Joni Mitchell came in and they removed their music from Spotify because of Joe Rogan, and they cost the company $4 billion. And
it was on a downward trend for like months.
Yeah, it was on a downward trend for months, and also the day that it lost, or the week, I should say, that it lost all that money, because I'm a shareholder. I have quite a bit of stock, as people know, on my channel, and it's like the whole market tanked that week. Yeah. Like my portfolio went from like 33,000 to 29,000. It was ugly. So Spotify wasn't the only one who dropped.
No, I know, but it's like a news story thing. They're on it. Everybody's paying attention to it. Everybody puts out a news, they all put out a news story that says that. So they're like, oh no, oh God, we got to do something. And I guess you know what? Thinking about it, I guess it ends up being kind of like a Twitter mob. That's disappointing.
By the way, Journey with Jordan, he says, like, if you solicit medical advice from a comedian's podcast, you have issues. And
that guy. Yeah, you're on. That's the correct attitude. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say most people that watch Joe Rogan don't sit there and go like, yeah, I think I'm going to make medical decisions based on what the guy said who was on news radio. No. And so they're what it is news. I saw the CNN clip that was floating around of the guy who was talking about that they're basically like, well, we all know that there's that guy who's just lifting weights and listening to Joe Rogan and doing whatever he says. And it's like, maybe there's a small sliver of people, but do you know that there's people that freak out if you insult Korean boy bands and will dox you? Like that's the nature of the world. Like, just like, I understand that that's not medical stuff, but I think that ends up being just an excuse. Like, right. The reason they want to get the misinformation thing is the excuse to try to bump Joe Rogan off, because they basically like the mainstream news or entertainment world pretends that he doesn't exist, even though he is 10 times as popular as them. It's right. This weird fringe thing that if you ask your mom about, she'll be like, oh, I hear he's bad. He does weird things, the news. It's like, no, he has a show, a bumbling talk show where he bullshits with people for 3 hours. That's not important other than it's really popular. And it's more popular than it's 4 times as popular as Tucker Carlson or whatever thing.
He's basically a slightly cleaner version of what Howard Stern was doing 20 years ago.
Yes, I wouldn't even say cleaner, because Howard Stern was on the radio. I guess now I don't know with Howard. Ever since he moved. He basically moved to satellite radio. I'm sure did fantastic, but became irrelevant culturally.
Actually, I wouldn't say he's irrelevant. He still has some pretty interesting commentary. Actually, it's very fascinating to listen to Howard Stern now. He's not as outrageous as he used to be, and almost seems to be quite thoughtful now.
Well, not even just that. I just mean like the idea, like the cultural prominence, the important thing that what was Howard Stern? You boil him down to what he was, a shock jock guy on the radio. And once he moved to satellite radio where he could do whatever the hell he wanted, he may have conquered it, but it's like Oprah moving to it's like, okay, well, you have your own network. It's not the same thing.
Right. I mean, there's no boss putting their thumb on him anymore, saying not to do this.
It was the shock value of someone doing this that made Howard Stern get his own movie,
Private Parts, which wasn't even as dirty as you'd think it would have been.
Yeah, and so the Joe Rogan thing is weird because he's just some guy, and he just started to have a podcast at the beginning of it, and he did. And he's conspiracy minded on his own, and he just likes talking to people. So people can be like, oh, he's doing this crazy. It's like, no, he's just being himself. That's how he always is. Anyone that's seen him over the last 10 years knows this. It's not weird that he had the doctor who would be contradictory on there.
Right.
I mean, I do know that he basically he got more on the shit list because he was not a big fan of the vaccine.
Yeah.
So that definitely
a lot of people strangely are not. Don't bother explaining in the chat why not. We're not going to show those comments. That's kind of besides the point.
Well, it's a big deal now, and so he became a lightning rod thing for that lately. But it's not out of the ordinary for him.
Right. Now, what's interesting about this is how Joe Rogan, because for someone who's known for being quite immature, his response to this whole thing was actually very, very mature.
It was very sweet. He was a nice guy.
Yeah, very, very sweet. I mean, he admitted, like, look, I don't always get it right. I get it wrong sometimes. I didn't want to offend people. And he even committed to saying, like, look, if I talk to a conspiratorial person, maybe the next episode we'll talk to someone who will respond to these, and we will have a back and forth, which is what I really want to do. And I saw that video and I was like, because again, I don't agree necessarily with Rogan's stance on the vaccine, but I do like that was his attitude. Like, hey, I could talk to the other side as well. Well, maybe I focus too much on this because the media doesn't cover it. But if people want me to talk to both people, I'm more than happy to do it. And I would have hoped that would have been the response that people would have been okay with. But it's interesting that you brought up the pulled episodes, because what probably happened was that response was so mature and so well thought out that they had to go back to old episodes and find naughty words or something he was saying to try to like show like, no, this guy can never change. This guy can never
They're trying
change.
to cancel him.
Right.
Which is stupid. They're also hilariously trying to cancel him at the exact moment that Whoopi Goldberg said her stupid thing about the Holocaust and got suspended.
Right.
And you can see the difference in how you get treated depending on how they like you. Like,
right. I mean,
she got suspended. And it was like, you're suspended. It's like, you're just suspending her because you want to pretend like you're doing the same thing, but you're not. Right. It's like, it's like when the Guardians of the Galaxy guy, like they dug up like James pedophile Gunn jokes or something. And then they were like, oh, he doesn't get to make a movie. And it was just, they just delayed it a couple years. And it's like, because it isn't real. They knew it wasn't real, but they had to pretend.
By the way, Steve, I just want to clarify, because he says Joe will be back someday soon. I'm sure another outlet. Spotify's not getting rid of Joe Rogan.
They shouldn't, if they were smart.
Oh, no. Joe Rogan, and even if Spotify's stock dropped on the Joe Rogan podcast and the investors came up, they just have to show, like, look, this is what Neil Young's music makes us in terms of listeners. This is what Joe Rogan's podcast. Also, the dirty little secret about Spotify is that it's not a music service. Spotify branched out into podcasts for a reason. They're branching out into audiobooks for a reason. Smart. They're branching out into news. I mean, Spotify wants to just be audible entertainment. That's what they want to be. And to get rid of people like Joe Rogan, like if you cancel Joe Rogan, then you got to start canceling other podcasts that are saying things that people don't like, and it's just not good.
Well, I think the idea that part of it is silly. Like at some point you're like, even if you want to use the medical, like it's always, he's spreading misinformation. It's like,
and he is, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. He is, but it's far milder than most misinformation that I hear.
Well, I mean, it depends. The main thing with that is it's purely the topic. It isn't specifically the topic of the coronavirus. That's it. That's what makes it a big deal right now. Other people, like his level of misinformation about this, or is that he has a specific. Okay, here's the weird thing about this. And I don't agree with him on his attitude toward this either. I'm not anti-vaccine or anything, but his attitude is genuine, right?
Yeah, he's now one of the more genuine I've heard.
Is the dumb shit that Rachel Maddow said about like Russians knocking out the power grid because they're trying to help Donald Trump or what? Like, is any of that shit genuine?
No.
Is Don Lemon genuine when he says
don't get
terrible thing? No. Is Brian Stelter genuine, especially with all the shit that just happened at CNN? Did you see that whole thing where Jeff Zucker was having a very well-known relationship with like his second in command for like 20 years, and he's pretending it just happened like 2 years ago, and because he fired Chris Cuomo, there's like this, he fired him in trouble.
Cuomo basically took him down.
yeah, he did. He took him down, and it was because, and apparently they were the ones that were instigating the governor of New York to actually show up on Chris Cuomo's show. They were like, "No, you need to do this. We'll give you notes on what to do." And it's so are they misinformation? Should they be on the air then? Because that's some bullshit, right? That's terrible. Right.
That is.
Yeah, that's a news station. That's not just some guy who has a podcast.
Yeah. No, Joe Rogan, like his level, his hesitancy again, because there are some people who I hate to say this, but there are some people who are so against the vaccine. It's like and the way that they talk about it is that that there's absolutely nothing that can convince them it's safe.
No, you and I have talked about this, that even if you're sympathetic to people who Trump supporters or something, the latching on to the being anti-vaccine as a political ploy is ridiculous.
Right.
Because it's not political in that sense. I mean, don't get me wrong, they kind of made it political. They made it political. The pro-vaccine people make it political. Wearing masks became this weird political thing. Everybody takes their goddamn Facebook picture and says, I have my mask on. Like, it became a thing. But you going like, I'm not doing it. Shut up. I'm just going to go out there and get it. Like, that's not going to help. Like, it's a silly position.
Yeah. Well, my position is that people should get it, but
oh, again, no. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I mean, like, it became politicized. It became politicized on both sides of whether you should, but blanket not getting vaccinated is stupid. Like,
right. And Joe Rogan, admittingly, again, he's talking to qualified doctors who are skeptical. You're allowed to do that. He's not talking to Jenny McCarthy, who has no.
Well, and to put that on there, there's two things that came up that we haven't even mentioned. One is that he had a different guy, an Australian doctor, on there, who challenged him on myocarditis or whatever, because he was under the impression that if you got the vaccine, you got myocarditis, and there was a higher risk of getting this, where it was big, like inflammation of the heart. And the doctor said, no, you actually have more of a chance if you get COVID without the vaccine. And then they looked it up on air, and the doctor was right. And so Joe Rogan tweeted out the thing or whatever, sent it out there and said, well, if I'm going to get fact checked, this I couldn't have had it done by a nicer guy.
Right.
And so it was like, yeah, because he's not being ideological about it. He's just having a conversation. He just happens to be not on the side of it at the time. So it's probably still isn't, but he at least was open-minded about it. On a different news show I watched, they had somebody, a buddies of his, do a news show called Breaking Points that's on YouTube. And they had a doctor who refuted every point that those two doctors made. Yeah. And then they sent it to him and said, hey, we had this doctor on and he refuted all these points that you made. And then Joe Rogan happily shared that and said, hey, look, there's more information about it.
Right. So this is why I'm confused, like, because again, like, this is not an Alex Jones situation. Like, with Alex Jones, you can't convince him no matter how much factual evidence. Heck, you could show him a picture of something and he would say it was doctored or something like that. Joe Rogan actually communicates with people,
even though they're buddies,
which is funny. Like, I know they're buddies, but
he's even said that he won't have Alex Jones on his show now without having someone there to like check everything in real time, because he thought about that. I think he said at one point that Trump asked to be on his show and he said no. Yeah, because he doesn't just talk to anybody. He thought about some responsibility, but I think he bumbles through how he does it because it's not like a corporate show. So he said that in his video, his Instagram video. He said he does all his booking, right? Which is insane. The most popular show in the fucking world, and the guy just does it with his phone. He's just like, oh, we want to go on the show? I don't know. I'm open this day, and then he does. Like, it just seems like goofy. Like there's a board of people that are figuring out who goes on news shows.
Well, and that also does make Rogan's response a little strange, because it's like when he says, like, I don't want to offend anyone or anything. I don't want to. It's like, well, maybe you should only have guests on and just, if all you want to do is goof around with your buddies on a podcast, maybe just do that and talk about fun stuff. I mean, I don't know.
Well, I mean,
just a thought.
Well, I think that he likes to talk to people that he finds interesting, and that can be anybody. I mean, that's what I always think. Whenever anybody's like, "Oh, I don't know, he's a bad," like, because you talk to somebody, if he comes up and they're like, "Well, he interviews bad people. He's the kind of guy. He's a weird guy that does this." It's like, "Oh, you mean he has Bernie Sanders on there or Neil deGrasse Tyson?" It's like there's lots of people that go on that guy's show. Whether or not you like him, the cold hard facts of Joe Rogan is he's a conspiracy minded guy. He's a comedian, so he's as funny as you either think he is or isn't. But he's a damn good interviewer. He can go 3 hours and be very entertaining at that, and not in like a hammy way. He's just good at asking questions. He's a very curious guy. He's good at it. He tends to be fairly knowledgeable and not a dumbass about it, or they look it up. Right. And so, yeah, there's a reason he's good at it, or he's number one, because he is good at this.
Right.
And I'm sorry. I'm sorry that people don't.
No, you don't have to like everyone, and I guess that's kind of the message at the end of the day. Like, I definitely think that misinformation's a problem. Alex Jones certainly deserves to be pulled for basically saying Sandy Hook is like a hoax. I mean, there's some places you just don't go, but Joe Rogan never went to a place that was super offensive.
Well, and I would say that there's kind of a difference there. Like Alex Jones, I think about this I think it is far more offensive if the news media lies. This was my big complaint about, like, Donald Trump was a moron, and I was not a fan of him. But I was actually much more, like, I was dismayed at the level at which the media would fudge things in order to get scandalous stories. Like, this actually, like, upset me deeply that they were just, like, everybody just became what Jon Stewart said Fox News was, basically. Right. And so they all turned into a parody of themselves. And that was incredible. Like, Alex Jones sits at a desk when he does his show, and he looks like a news show. John Oliver does this technically, like, like, whether or not you like or he's right about stuff. Like, he sits at a desk and he talks to you like a news stuff. It's what the guy in the chat said. Joe Rogan is some asshole with a sign behind his name, or like behind him when he talks, who's smoking pot with Elon Musk. Like this is not like, you don't watch him and go like, yeah, he knows, he gets it. I'm definitely going to do what he said instead of a doctor. Like, you don't do that. Like, somebody does. I'm sure somebody does. But you can't stop that person.
Right. But it's so disappointing that, like, the end result for everyone is not to, like, say, hey, Joe, have you considered doing things like this? Have you considered the consequence of what you're saying? It's like, no, get rid of him. And then he says voluntarily, like, they just jump straight to, we got to get rid of him. And then he responds and says, I probably could do better. So here's what we're going to do going forward.
And he's been asked that, to be honest. I don't remember what episode of his thing, because I don't like Joe Rogan, like a lot of interview podcasts. Like, if it's somebody interesting, I will watch it. There are lots of interview podcasts I will listen to, but I don't listen to all of them because I don't usually know who the guest is or whoever, like, maybe. But so for him, he was asked by somebody that exact question. And they said, well, do you feel like you have a responsibility? And he said, and this was months before this. And he said, yeah, I do. I think about it. And he kind of rattled off, like, I don't have as many people. Like you said, Alex Jones, if he comes on, I have someone there to check him because I'm worried. I think about it. I think about political people I have on. So he does think about it at least some point, because he's like, hey, whoever thinks about, I suddenly have a show that like 10 million people watch. Like, that's weird. If you had that, you would probably think about it a little differently when you put it together.
Well, I remember, like, my channel's not like this anymore, but I remember the first time a video of mine hit 200,000 views, and it was kind of like, whoa.
Yeah. It makes it, you would think that you'd have to be conscious of it, especially if you were doing some sort of interviewee thing where you're like, oh, I interviewed this person and it suddenly blew up. You'd be like, well, maybe I do have some sort of importance. So I think he's thought about it. I just don't think that he saw much outside of the realm of talking about it when you talk to people that don't agree.
Right. But he made the promise to change, and it's just so disappointing, and not unsurprising, but disappointing that, it's like his response is the response we should hope for. Like, hey, I'm going to do better. Here's what I'm going to do to address certain things. And they're like, no, not good enough. We want you gone.
Well, part of it is that you never, for the kind of Twitter mob thing, if you're ever on the receiving end, and not like I know this, but I've seen, people have said this who get this. If you're ever on the end of, like, everybody is calling you names and mad at you, you never apologize. And technically, Joe Rogan didn't apologize. He just said he would think about it and try to do better in the future. He didn't say, I'm so sorry. Because if you apologize, that's like blood in the water. They're going to just try to so once he said that, it just started it bigger, because they're like, oh, we almost got him. We're going to take him down. We're a pack of wolves, and we're going to do this. And the people that want to take him down already hate him. It isn't about this. That's the part that pisses me off. I think that's the main thing about this. They already didn't like him. They're not people that are like, oh, I was a big fan of his, and then once he interviewed those two doctors, I was like, I don't know about this guy. Nobody did that. They're all people that already hated him, think he's on their shit list for being a transphobe or whatever, because he doesn't like people in MMA that transition, or all the other various things over the last 5 to 10 years that he's gotten in trouble for. That's what it is. They're like, we hate him. He's on our list. We finally got the thing we think we can take him down with. And that's why today I watched some video of that India Arya lady who I don't know anything about other than she has a period in her name. And she released something where he said something about being in a black neighborhood, and he said something that was offensive 10 years ago or whatever.
Right.
And it's out of context, random clip that maybe it was offensive. I don't care at this point. Like, but you're trying to take him down. That's what you're doing. You're going to show that to Spotify, hope the hell it knocks his stock more, and hope that they'll dump him or something. You're just trying to get rid of him.
Right. Which good luck getting them to try to convince the shareholders, like, yeah, we just got to dump $100 million into give this guy $100 million. He's just going to take his show. He's going to take it somewhere else.
And he's going to be just as successful because the audience is with him, not with Spotify. They don't give a shit about Spotify.
Right. Well, actually, they're pretty happy with Spotify because Spotify has been defending him this whole time and said, like,
but that's the thing. Like, they're gonna keep needling him. And the correct response when they said, hey, you had this guy on there and we're all upset about it, was shut up and I don't care. Like, that's the correct response. No response at all, or don't care. And then everybody would have went boo, and they would have done that, and then you don't give them a response for a week and they go away.
Yeah, which is basically what Dave Chappelle did. Actually, Dave Chappelle took it a step further. He had 3 demands. He's like, 1, you have to see my special. 2, you have to give me a chance to talk. And 3, you have to admit that Hannah Gabbie isn't funny. Which, it was funny how Twitter misinterpreted that. Like, you mean he's telling you who's funny? It's like, no, he's making a request, a demand that you obviously cannot. You cannot guarantee that, and it's just as absurd as requesting him to do some of the things that you're doing. So, and anyway, I think that was a good run on that topic. Still disagree with him on the shots, but I'm glad with how he handled it. I'm glad with how Spotify handled it, and I guess we're gonna. And by the way, folks, Jon Stewart, who I've got a complicated history with Jon Stewart now because he's the one who kind of started this whole we can mix the news with comedy, and he was like the first one who did that, and now it's really morphed into something that it probably shouldn't have morphed into. But he's still a sane level guy and said, this is not going to help. You are hurting your own cause. Engage with him. There's no reason to go down this road. And so
if they succeeded in canceling Joe Rogan, like getting Spotify to make him go away, or at least cutting him, you would have just made all this culture war shit worse.
Yeah.
Like, you wouldn't have helped.
No, but they don't see it that way. They just want to get rid of the person that you
can't get rid of him. That's the problem. It's like the J.K. Rowling thing. Like, everybody freaks out about everything J.K. Rowling says, even though she holds a standard opinion 80% of the modern world holds, basically. Just some sort of middle of the road like 50-something-year-old feminist opinion.
Right. And you're not going to get rid of Harry Potter. I mean, it's like,
no, but they did a whole damn show where they didn't invite her, right, to that thing.
Actually, it's funny when you talk to when they asked the actors about that later on, the actors said that no, she was invited, she's just too busy. She was too busy. So
that's fine. I don't know. I didn't know that. That's fine.
Yeah. And she was constantly referenced throughout the special. Like, so it was kind of like, yeah, she wasn't there, but she was there. And I mean, who knows? Maybe there's some truth to that. Maybe that was the middle ground. I don't know, but you're not getting.
Oh, you might be right. It would make more sense that she just didn't show up and they just needed to fill it. And it probably was pre-edited before she had a big blow up. But her big thing was the same sort of thing. It was like a big, we're all going to flip out about something. And it's like, it's a Twitter mob type thing. Most Americans don't give a shit. And if they did, they were told some sort of watered down version of the story. Or some sort of alternate thing where it's like, oh, she's a horrible transphobe. And it's like, I'm almost 100% positive that J.K. Rowling doesn't care if you're trans. Like, she just doesn't. Like, she just is kind of.
No, she's just. She made it very clear. Her concern was laws they were trying to change to accommodate trans people that she feels could be abused. And those are conversations worth having, because the thing that activists need to understand when you start changing laws, you start changing rules, is you really do need to think through, well, if we do this, what else is a possibility? And they don't even want to consider that there's any potential harmful ramifications for doing some of the things that they are suggesting. But we're not going to get into that topic because
no, it's probably best to avoid that.
You know, we're going to end the Spotify conversation there. And we're now going to move on to, I think we actually have time for the second topic. And that is something that should be less controversial. It probably won't be, but it should be. And that is Netflix. Now, we're going to sound like old men at this point because we're physical media lovers. I've got some physical media right there, right over my shoulder. Still have this Dragon Ball Z tape. I got it for $1. It brings me a little happiness. I don't know why. And we were around. We were around in the day.
Back in the day.
when my dad got an email and said, tired of paying Blockbuster's late fees, try Netflix for $15 a month. We will mail you 3 DVDs a month, no late fees, send them back when you want. And I remember we tried it. It was like kind of a weird thing. Like, wait, so they're just going to mail us the movie and we watch it and then we send it back, and we could, like, it was such a strange concept, but we tried it, loved it. And we basically, I'm not going to say we never went back to Blockbuster again. We did, but we certainly went a heck of a lot less. And I remember like how my mind exploded the first time when I even remember the title specifically. It was Heart's War with Colin Farrell and Bruce Willis.
Movie, yeah.
Good movie. Not an action Bruce Willis movie, but a good movie. And I remember how we had forgot about it, and 3 weeks went by. It's like, oh, we haven't watched that. And then we watch it real quick and we send it back, and it was like, there was no late fee. There was no late fee. Boy, we really never went back to Blockbuster after that. So I don't know. How do you remember being introduced to Netflix? Out of curiosity.
Well, to be completely honest here, because I am, I actually had a conversation with someone recently where I was like, in the last 10 years, and I'm probably under exaggerating this, but I'm like, I've probably seen 3 TV shows and probably less than 20 new movies because I don't care. And I mean, like at some point, and so Netflix falls into that. I never had Netflix. I still don't have it. I have Netflix on my computer. I think it's my brother's account. I think I watched a movie and now my kids will occasionally watch something on there. I know I bought Hulu. I pay for that because Penny wanted to watch an anime. I think it was
My Hero Academia.
Yes, that was why I got it. Yes, it was My Hero Academia. She wanted to watch that. Although they wouldn't stop talking about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which is the stupidest thing I've ever seen. But so it's not like I don't pay for this, and I think even that one of my kids got the Disney Plus thing from my brother to watch something. I think for a similar reason, because even with Disney movies, I buy them all now because they're used at the Cave locally, and I can get any Disney movie I want for like $4 on Blu-ray, and I don't have to care. And I don't want to watch anything new, so I never really glommed onto the thing. Adrian did, my fiance. She talks about the idea that the disc version was much better in terms of, because there was such a selection. You could watch anything if it was coming on the disc. The Netflix, the streaming service, has only so many movies.
Right. Well, interesting thing about Netflix, their business model has always, and we've talked about this, has always kind of been a mystery. Now, I actually understood the business model with the DVDs when they were doing it. It's like they would charge $15 a month, eventually $20, and you'd have so many at a time. Now, they made money, and they sold you the no late fees thing as a perk. It wasn't a perk. It was their way to make money, because if you had those discs and you just didn't watch them and you just kept them there, you were essentially indefinitely renting them. They did not like it when you got the movie, watched it that night, and sent it back the next day.
Yeah, they made less money if you did that. That's 100% correct.
But at the same time, you could see how the business model would work. It's like, okay, so the people who don't watch them as fast, that's where they're making their money. And back then, the way movies made money, it was multi-level, simple. You put the movie in theaters first, and it made money. It maybe didn't make a profit sometimes, but it made money. Then they would send it to DVD, and it would have like a second opening, if you will.
Yeah.
And then you would sell the TV rights and cable streaming rights. So there was multiple ways that a movie and a show could make money. But then Netflix comes along, says, we're going to release all of our stuff straight onto streaming. There's not going to be any commercials. We're not going to put it in theaters first. We're not going to release it on DVD. It's just going to go straight to Netflix. And, you know, it didn't make a lot of sense at that point, because it's like, so, but now it's $10 a month and it's a buffet, and some people just watch a bunch of stuff because now it's really easy. Like, what is the business model here? It almost seems like a Ponzi scheme. And for the longest time, I guess that's kind of what it was, because Netflix was spending 150%, I hear, of their revenue on new shows to constantly attract new subscribers.
That seems terrible.
Yeah, unfortunately for them, that gravy train ran out at some point, because their stock dipped a couple weeks ago, and the reason is because they only expect to add 2.5 million customers when
There's
they
only
were
so many people.
Yeah, but and that's kind of why I think this is worth talking about, because what did they expect to happen?
Yeah. If your business model is built on getting new viewers, you can only go so far. And then you got them.
Right. Like, well, and the thing is, the numbers have always been kind of like a weird thing with Netflix. First of all, Netflix doesn't like to share those numbers. None of the streaming services do, which personally, as an investor, as someone who has had Netflix stock, as someone who has Disney stock, as someone who has Comcast, I have a lot of these stocks. I don't think they should be allowed not to share those numbers, because it's like, well, as investors, maybe we should know what the numbers are.
That especially makes sense on the small ones, because I always think that for the guy, what's it called? Is it Paramount now? But the CBS one that Star Trek's on? Yeah. Because they were like, oh, there's a Star Trek show, and it's like, that show looks really expensive. It looks terrible, but it looks expensive. Mm-hmm. Do you get enough people to budget at $6 million an episode? What the hell does it cost?
I don't know. I mean,
Patrick Stewart's on one. Does the Patrick Stewart show make money? I'm gonna guess it doesn't.
Yeah, you know what I really wonder. I wonder how Netflix justify. I mean, aside from the fact that they wanted prestige and they wanted their Oscar, I wonder how Netflix business model justifies spending $200 million on The Irishman. Yeah. And no knocking against The Irishman. That's a great movie. That tied with Parasite is the best film of that year. But how do you justify spending $200 million on a movie and then giving it away for free, essentially? Like, it doesn't.
I thought about that for that The Rock movie. Didn't they do that? The one with The Rock and Ryan Reynolds?
Yeah, they did. And that
was like a super expensive movie.
And the movie like that might have made at least $50 million in the theaters. Well, maybe even 100. I mean,
like, because it's what you said. If you put it in the theater, even if you put $100 million movie in the theater and it makes $75 million, you've still got to put it on. You got to put it on tape or Blu-ray or DVD. You got to put it on. You got to sell the rights. You did all these things where you're like, oh, it's going to make money forever. Once it's on just Netflix, don't people watch it and then never watch it again? Like, who the hell is going to search for it? Like, even if it's on TBS, you're going to watch it. Like, I watched so many bad movies that were just on cable, because back in the day, you just got whatever you got.
Right. And one of the things that I wonder, like with physical media, let me move over here so that we can see this. So ironically, I'm holding up a Netflix movie that's on Criterion collection. And I'm using this to make a point. So like, now let's say that this was not Criterion. Let's just say that this was like a standard DVD. And at some point it would have gone down from $20 to $10 to $5. You know, people looking through the bargain bin and they find this, looks interesting. They pay $5 for it. First of all, you've now sold it for $5. You're getting something, but this movie stays in circulation and people can still discover it. How do you discover this on Netflix once it's? How old is this movie? This movie is 2015. This movie is like 7 years old now. How do you stumble upon a 7-year-old Netflix movie.
You don't.
On Netflix.
It also depends on what if you're a kid like you or I, like a lot of movies I watch. I always talk about this with Highlander. Highlander's the movie that's just terrible that I watched a million times when I was younger, and it just sort of got lumped in with like Indiana Jones and Star Wars and all these other things. It was like I also watched Highlander a million times. It's not very good, but it was on TV all the time, and I ended up owning a tape, and I like watched it a bunch. And so there's a lot of movies like that. If your parents only have Hulu or Netflix or whatever, then you're cut down to however many. And even if that's the case, are you really rifling through them, watching them? Do you look at the picture and watch them? I have no idea, actually. Maybe you do. Maybe there's lots of kids that are just sitting at home watching stuff.
I don't know. I also find it strange because, I mean, Netflix, the new Netflix model has made this very weird thing where numbers, in a sense, don't matter. Like what? Like Cowboy Bebop. This is the live action Cowboy Bebop, which I actually liked quite a bit. It wasn't as good as the anime, of course, but few things will be. But that show got canceled like less than a month after it premiered, and it was like, well, but it logged in how many millions of views the first week, and it's like, well, didn't matter. It didn't drive any subscribers, and it's like, that is unthinkable. Like, if Cowboy Bebop had gotten the numbers on Netflix that it had gotten on NBC or ABC, they'd be renewing it for 3 more seasons right then and there, because it's like, great, we have this many million subscribers. This is how much the ads are going to cost. Netflix doesn't have ads.
Yeah. Who's going to, like, how many things exist where you would sign up for a service you didn't have in order to watch them?
Yeah,
would you really, like, if you didn't have Hulu, what are they going to put on there? Would a live action Cowboy Bebop do it for you? Like, if you didn't have Netflix, would that be the thing that did it? You'd be like, I'm gonna go watch that.
But Hulu's different because Hulu does have ads on their service. So if they have a show where a lot of people are watching it, they can justify renewing that show even if it doesn't get any subscribers.
Because I had Hulu. I remember watching Hulu, a decade ago. I don't know. It must not have been a decade. Pretty close, actually, right? Because I would watch it. Yeah. It would have TV shows that were on the next day or something. Mm-hmm. And so it was kind of like I had to DVR something because I could watch whatever on, like, TV show literally the next day, and it would be online, and you'd watch ads with it, but it would be there. So you're right, it is a different business model. Netflix, it is just kind of a one and done sort of thing. I always think about this, and I don't know I think we've talked about it, but it's like I always think about it with their big tentpole street like event things. Like, if you watch Stranger Things and you were all excited about it, and you heard everybody talk about it, and you watched it, season 2 or whatever, because it came out, are you ever going to watch one of those episodes again? Maybe you'll binge the whole thing again, but you'll never watch episode 4 of season 2 of that show.
Right. It's not like Friends where people go and they watch their very specific episode. And then Friends is like another funny thing. Like, can you imagine if Friends premiered today and 50 million people watched the first season, and Netflix looked at it and said, well, that's great, but no one subscribed to the service to watch Friends, so canceled.
Well, and in the end, I wonder if it's going to end up being kind of like the music thing, to kind of tie it to what we were doing earlier. One of the funnier things, looking at the importance of Neil Young, who at which I know you said earlier, like, I don't give a shit about Neil Young. I've never liked Neil Young. He is a terrible singer. He's a very talented guitar player, and he's a very talented songwriter. Once he starts singing, I'm like, I find your voice annoying, Neil Young, and I don't want to hear you. I disagree, but and I like lots of terrible singers, so this is just specific to Neil Young.
Yes, I will attest to that.
The thing with that is that that streaming services like Spotify or Pandora, or whoever, actually make a good amount of money off of classic rock music, because that actually makes up a huge swath of what people listen to. Because if you don't listen to the radio, you're listening to a lot of different stuff, and a lot of people want to hear that. So it actually increased the value of like older rock music on a streaming service because they didn't have it, or like that's what people are going to look for, and they're going to look at it, or they're going to want to listen to it. So is that what is going to happen with the streaming thing? Like, do people sign up and go, oh, I can watch old episodes of Frasier here. I'll just do that.
You know, that's a strange thing. They kind of are like, so I have some friends. This is a true story, by the way. And I know you're gonna like cringe a little bit, but they love The Office and Parks and Recreation. There's actually a time period where I think they do nothing but watch The Office and Parks and Recreation.
That's
and
a
they
pretty
would
good
just
show.
Yeah, but you know, it's to watch it all day, almost every day
not all
for
day.
over a year. Like look, it's not The Simpsons isn't even that good. But anyway, they were doing it on Netflix, and then NBC, knowing that The Office was accounted for a lot of views on Netflix, they're like, hey, we're gonna pull that,
right,
and we're gonna put it on Peacock. And these friends said, shoot, now I gotta sign up for another streaming service just so I can continue watching The Office. And I kind of raised my hand like, or crazy thought, you could buy the complete series on DVD for $50 and it never charges you a dime ever again.
yeah, that's how CBS Plus, which is now Paramount Plus, makes Star Trek shows, and I am a huge Star Trek fan. And their Star Trek shows look fucking terrible, and I won't watch them. And they're stupid, and they're just action shit, and it's like the J.J. Abrams movie. Like it's just the like, oh, we don't know what to do with this, so here's a bunch of action crap. I watched something that told me, or that reviewed the Captain Picard TV show, and I found it offensive. Just in terms of character stuff that you're doing, like, just as a pet peeve, don't bring characters back 30, 20 years later or whatever, and then murder all of their friends because you need drama. Like this actually upsets me greatly. Like at that point, it doesn't count. I don't care anymore. So that like the Captain Picard TV show brought back 7 of 9, who's an entire character on Star Trek. That's the whole point, is she's trying to discover humanity. She's a wonderful character. And then they're like, oh no, all of her friends died, and now she's like a sad person. Like, oh, okay, never mind. I don't want to watch this. I'll never watch this now, because this is the worst thing I've ever heard. You ruined something that exists. It's like the thing I complained about with the newer Star Wars movies, where it's like you're just murdering people because you don't know what to do. And so in that sense, literally once I learned that this is what they were doing, and I was like, oh, but all the shows are there. I just bought them all. I bought every Star Trek show on DVD and Blu-ray. And I'm like, okay, I'm never giving you money. And my kids even watched. One of my kids was like, oh, I want to watch MacGyver, because they watched MacGyver. They have a remake of MacGyver that was on CBS. And I was like, nope. And I bought it. I was like, I bought it for her birthday. I'm like, now you can watch it. I'm not going to pay for a streaming service because I'm actually mad at them. And
yeah, well, yeah, that's actually another conflict. Like not that this is high on my concern list, but I know people who are conflicted about subscribing to streaming services because Netflix and Paramount or whatever, they take that money and they make shows that they are morally offended by. You know, some of them are Christian conservatives. They don't like when, and it's kind of like, so it's like kind of a weird thing for Netflix where it's like, okay, yeah, we're funding Christian movies because there's obviously a market for them, but we're also making these skin flicks basically. And you know, the Christians don't want to give money to companies that make skin flicks. So
yeah, they're opening a market for conservative media to make movies.
Yeah, and they have been making movies. Actually, they're starting to get a little better. I actually quite liked I Can Only Imagine, and that American Underdog movie about the football player. That was like a good faith-based film without explicitly naming God.
In general, they're pretty hokey, but
in general, but they're starting to actually get a little better. So hopefully, but
I mean, that's the thing though. You're leaving out an audience when you do that. That is one of the weird things about kind of the modern age of filmmaking. And I'm not, it doesn't really bother me one way or the other, but I'm kind of like, sometimes I'll watch something, or I'll see like ads for something, and I'll be like, I get what you're doing. Like, I get that you're trying to appeal to a modern audience, but it's like, you have to consider, like, it's kind of like the Twitter thing. It's like, in the end, the people that complain on Twitter is actually a really small percentage of it. So you're kind of chasing a small percentage of an audience to try to please them so you can get good reviews or people to praise whatever you're doing. And you're making things a lot of the time that comes off pandering.
Right. So, right. But here's another thing to kind of keep in mind, because everyone wants to get into streaming because that's the future. And then you see headlines like this, where Peacock is losing $1.7 billion in 2021. And you wonder, well, what is the end game in this? Because keep in mind, Netflix has been going on for more than a decade with their streaming stuff now, and they're still losing money. And it's like, well, guys, Netflix is the undisputed king of streaming. Everyone is chasing Netflix, including Disney, I want to add. And if they're not making a go at it, what makes you think you can make a go at it? And this is just this seems like a really strange thing. And then somehow these studios are thinking like, let's see here. Movie theaters are dying. So let's take Turning Red. Let's not put it in theaters. Let's not put it on DVD. Pixar film, by the way. Let's send it straight to Disney Plus and give it away at no upcharge. Yeah, that'll make you more money than going through the multi-tiered selling system.
Yeah, it is something that, I mean, it's disappointing in the end that the movie going experience will die. I mean, it's been on that trend for 60 years or whatever. Like, they've been trying to come up with something to compete with TV when it came out, even back in the day. And it's sort of been like, now you can have a TV that's so big that it's like being in a theater if you're close enough. Yeah, it isn't the same experience though.
No, it's not. And I don't think the thing is, I think people still want the good movie going experience, but
I think you got to give it to them though. You got to give it to them.
Right. And I know that sequels are safe, but you also alienate a lot of people who want original stuff, and that's where the streaming services are giving them.
Yes, the one thing that streaming services do really, really well, although you can't really transition out of it like you would have before, is they give you really good $2 million movies.
Right.
Like, there's a lot of great, very talented people that make really low budget, like psychological movies or whatever, horror movies, something like that's incredibly well shot, digitally shot little movie that you could do. Like, they buy them or they make them just for it, and they're very, very successful, and they turn a profit. That part of it makes sense. But yeah, the part that doesn't make sense is making some kind of blockbuster and putting it on Netflix. That makes no sense at all.
Right. But then you have like a company like A24 who makes really weird stuff, and most of it is profitable in theaters because it's like, oh, it only made 15 million. Well, we spent $1 or $2 on it.
Exactly. They're smart about it. They make something that's so unique that you want to go see it, even if they only get some people to go do that. They get enough people.
Right.
That's right.
And but then it's funny how it's like. By the way, I think this is like kind of interesting because Netflix spent a boatload of money acquiring the rights to the Neon Genesis Evangelion anime that had been in licensing purgatory for I don't know how many years. They ponied up the money for everything except the Frank Sinatra song, and they put it on Netflix. And then they basically admitted through a mainstream DVD and Blu-ray release, I want to add, that that was probably not a wise investment. It really didn't. I don't know what metrics they were using, but it clearly didn't bring people to the service, so they had to sell DVDs and Blu-rays, which
an odd idea. That's such an odd idea to try to bring people to the service. That utterly that, like you said that earlier, it's like, oh, they're trying to entice people to get it. And I'm like, how could you entice enough people to get Netflix who didn't have it already? Right. Like, isn't it that 90% of your audience already has Netflix? Aren't they already going to have it?
Yeah, and that's why the growth numbers was concerning to the investors, because it was like the wake-up call. Like, you and I have talked about this for years, privately, not publicly, that Netflix kind of always felt like a Ponzi scheme.
Yeah.
It's like it was kind of like a more sophisticated version of MoviePass, where it's like they give you way more than what you're paying them, and most people don't stop to think like, how does this work exactly? And now
Yeah.
Wall Street is finally asking that question, because now that the subscriber growth has stunted and Netflix doesn't make money from the theaters, really. They don't make money on discs. They don't make money through syndication deals. They don't have commercials, which commercials seems like the most logistical thing you can do is, okay, put commercials on there. And then if you have a very successful show, even if it doesn't drive any subscribers to the service, you can justify renewing that show because the people advertising, oh, hey, you see how many views we got? Now the commercials cost $5 million for 30 seconds or whatever.
Right.
Like, that's where it is. Now, a lot of people say that they will cancel Netflix if they put commercials on. I think that's a lot of bluff. Some probably will at first, but eventually people will
Why
get
would
used
you
to
do that?
Yeah, well, here's what I tell people.
Who's canceling this? People that never had cable? People that never watched a movie on TV? Like what kind of precious person lives in that exact moment where they only ever had Netflix and they're like, what? I got to watch movies in my house because my mom paid for it. And now I like this upsets me. It's like, what? No, we all watched. You know how many John Wayne movies I watched as a kid where I had to watch 100 million commercials in order to get through the whole thing? Like all of them.
Well, and funny thing, like one of the selling points of cable early on was that there was no commercials.
Oh, that's
and
funny.
then at some point they realized, oh yeah, we have to get people hooked, but now we have to put commercials on. And then when people said, well, wait, I'm paying for it, why are you giving me commercials? And they're like, oh, well, this is basic cable. Go to the premium channels.
Wow.
Those won't have commercials, but even they kind of cross the line. Now they still don't have commercials, but they do have sponsors for the show. So that's Game of Thrones is brought to you by Starbucks.
Is it really?
So much,
well, is that why it's in the episode? No,
that's a joke because because of that whole.
That would have been funny.
That would have been funny. Oh,
I don't actually understand that. I guess that's true. I don't actually understand the HBO's business model either.
Yeah, well, HBO. Yeah, HBO kind of has like a weird. Well, HBO also releases movies in theaters. Like, like they put movies in theaters, especially their documentaries, because they want Academy Awards. But yeah, but HBO. Well, HBO was interesting because HBO was during the era where people would cancel their service once something was over, and that's why you would see like the miniseries, like Angels in America, where it's like there's a miniseries with Al Pacino, Meryl Streep, and all these famous actors, can only see it on HBO, so they'll subscribe for a month and they'll get rid of it. I don't know if that's going on. Well, I take it back. It's not happening with Netflix. Interestingly, the channel that seems to happen the most with is Disney Plus, because Disney Plus has so few shows going on. Like, I remember how many people canceled after The Mandalorian season 1 ended because they didn't have anything else to show that was. They got
all the Disney movies, though. Aren't people watching all the Disney movies?
I think too many people own them. I think too many people own them. So
they do. They do release them over and over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's true.
They're always like, oh, they're going back in the vault. They're going back in the vault until 6 months from now.
Yeah. So yeah, but anyway, I think my prediction for the future of like Netflix is like, and all these streaming services, there's going to be more commercials, and I think at some point they're going to eventually kind of have to realize that, yeah, we're putting expensive stuff on streaming to prop our numbers, but we're going to have to also embrace the theatrical release because we have to get something back.
If they do ads and they just cut their losses and make movies cheaper. I mean, you can make a great looking movie for $50 million now. You just don't put famous people in. Famous people aren't worth a damn anyway. Like, it isn't like the 90s.
Much as they used to.
Yeah, no, if you're Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah. Oh, so yeah, Arnold Schwarzenegger doesn't draw people anymore. Right now, I think Dwayne Johnson. Oh, is it time to wrap up?
Saying hi. We're having a conversation.
Oh, shoot, you saw me? I tried to be discreet.
You were not. We're on camera. What do you mean?
I was like maybe a quick.
Well, since she's there, I actually wanted to show earlier. This is actually to kind of make the kids jealous because I got my Evangelion set in here, or is this the one? Oh no, that's the vinyl. Where did I put it? Well, anyway, I got Evangelion, and I guess it's over in the other room, but it's like this big. And
yeah,
it's like
I saw a picture of that. What is that? Because I got it, and I got it for my kid or for Lily, and then I got it twice because I accidentally bought the foreign one, so I have to return the foreign one.
Yeah, that could be.
It's not going to play on my Blu-ray player, so that's
yeah. Well, it would play on mine because I have a region-free player.
I will have to get one of those.
It's actually fun. You press like 2, and then it goes to region B and things like that. It's
neat.
Yeah, it is super awesome. But anyway, so yeah, I don't know what the future of Netflix is. I mean, I guess it's kind of like YouTube. I mean, YouTube is around. We love it. Obviously, we can broadcast on it, but YouTube's never made money. And at some point, you wonder what's going to give.
Yeah, they just know it's clearly the future. My guess would be that if you have all these streaming services, they'll just consolidate. It'll be like, at some point, people will just be like, you know what, this isn't worth it. It's way easier if we just make a deal with Netflix, and we pay the money, and then now news service whatever is on there. Like it'll just consolidate down. I think that even though it would be nice if theater going experience continued, like you were talking about, I don't think it will. I think it'll slowly die out now that especially after the Marvel movies reach their apex. Like I always think about this now. I'm like, you reached the end of your story. You made the biggest movie of all time. And I'm not attesting to the quality. I'm just saying, like, you ended everything. You had every movie star. You did everything you could. You made all of the money. You can't just be like, oh no, that guy's here. He shoots lightning. It's like, yeah, nobody cares. Like you killed half the world or half the universe and brought them back. Like you don't get to be like, oh, I guess this one guy is mad now.
Right.
And so
now they're making like the universe expansion thing. I don't know. I mean, I enjoyed the latest Spider-Man movie, but it's I have to agree with Martin Scorsese. It's not cinema.
Yeah, the Spider-Man thing is very weird because everybody liked it. My kids mentioned today how much they loved it. But it's also like, is this what we're gonna do now? Are we gonna I hope this isn't because the novelty of it is people are gonna latch onto that, and then they're gonna take the wrong lesson from it.
Yeah, well, I am happy that Sing 2 did pretty good. Funny story. So I was talking to someone, and these are people who have views on things, and I definitely think their view is like, don't tell me what to do. But they were complaining to me about like how they were getting tired of superhero movies and things like that. And I said, well, why don't you, like, when the Academy Awards announce their nominees, go see some of those movies. Those might be some of the movies you want to see in theaters that aren't superhero movies. And they said, oh, well, that's the last thing I need is for liberal Hollywood to tell me what's good. It's like, oh my gosh. And you wonder why they're not making the movies you want to see, because you're not
definitely a stigma that depending on what it is, where we've gotten to a moment in time where there's an expectation that if you're like, oh, it's the best picture movie and it's about some subject, like, oh, it's going to be some kind of a preachy, which has been a thing forever. You're like, oh, I don't want to watch this. So I can see that. It used to be, though, that it is definitely true that if you were a kid in the 80s or 90s, like I was, that you would see an ad for a movie like The Matrix or something and be like, oh, wow, I've never seen nothing like that before. And then you'd watch it.
Right.
And nobody cares now. I know Roland Emmerich, I guess, was complaining about this now because he likes to do that, even though all of his movies are terrible. But
yeah,
but he does like try to make a spectacle of a thing that isn't a sequel to something, even though he made an Independence Day sequel. Like he's trying to make something. Like,
yeah. I mean, I didn't see Moonfall and don't plan to, just because I'm familiar with that director, and I have a very good feeling I will not like Moonfall.
What? You don't like Roland Emmerich movies?
The Patriot, maybe. Maybe
what?
Independence.
That's like the worst one.
That's the only one that was halfway decent. Although Independence Day is okay. So bad, it's good.
Yeah, Independence Day is novel in its own way, and I actually, me and Adrian talked about this. Kind of like the second one because it was like stupid. It was like you did a sequel thing, but you did all the sequel stuff where you were like, if this is what happens, here's what happens now, and you're like, oh, okay, well, if you had to do this, it could have been worse.
But boy, was Will Smith's presence missed in the sequel.
Yes, but every time they showed Judd Hirsch, I was like, that's kind of amazing that he's still alive. And he was on a little boat, and it made me happy.
Yeah, no.
Not great. I'm not saying it's good. But,
right.
I mean, there's a lot of bad, like, did you see the second Jurassic World? That was like the stupidest movie I've ever seen in my whole life.
That was terrible. That was terrible.
That little girl at the end was like, oh, I'm going to release the dinosaurs. They're just like me. And they're like, they're dinosaurs, you stupid child. You're going to kill everyone. What are you talking about? It didn't make any sense.
Yep. And Jeff Goldblum's big return was basically him behind a desk the whole time. You could tell it's like, yeah, give me a paycheck and I'll be on set for a few days. And
apparently he'll be in the new one. That was the only good thing that came out of that movie. I was like, all I thought when I left was like, if the next movie just starts and they just tell you dinosaurs took over the world, I'd be like, okay, that's stupid, but I'm down. I'm fine with this. Like, none of these sequels to Jurassic Park are good. It's fine. But like, yeah, no, anytime they're like, hey, we're bringing back this thing, I'm like, I don't care anymore. Like, this never works. I'm never excited about it.
Yeah, I do miss, like, it's kind of funny. Like, I know that, people complain about Avatar a lot, but boy, you look back and it's like, yeah, it might have been cliched, but boy, did it give us something we hadn't seen before when we first saw
Avatar. Yeah, Avatar, at least on a technical level, gave you something. Like, that was the most visually interesting movie ever made. At that point, it was like visual effects had been rubbery and kind of off-putting for the computer effects, and that one was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sleepy. I'm gonna go.
Oh, are you?
It's good to see you, hear your voice for a little bit.
Good to see you too.
I'm gonna depart. Oh my god!
Nice to join me.
I'm old. My knees hurt.
Yeah. So interesting.
No, the
podcast.
That was fun.
At this point, it's not a podcast anymore. Now we're just actually goofing off.
Yeah, that's fine though. Yeah, no, I had thought about that. Yeah, I'm never excited about anything anymore. I think the only one I approve of now officially, and it's like 12 years old at this point, was Tron. That was the only one. The Tron Legacy was the only sequel I'm like, okay.
I really enjoyed Alita. Like,
I've heard that was good. I didn't watch it.
Yeah, this was like a reminder of like, yeah, you could still make good original movies, but even though Fox was interested in making a sequel, then they got bought by Disney, and apparently Disney is not interested in making a sequel.
Yeah, how do you feel about Disney as a big fan, Kevin? Are you do you have that, like, I don't know about you guys feeling sometime as
I mean, you went to our wedding, so we clearly still love Disney, but I'm not gonna lie, there's things about the way the company is run that I don't like. I actually think one of the negative thing about Bob Iger's legacy is that he really franchised the industry to an extent that no other company did. Right. And now I'm really concerned about the Bob Chapek era because, when you have like a guy who basically is a bean counter and he does not have any experience in entertainment. And this is a guy who looks at Pixar, the studio at Disney that's still making the original high quality movies for the most part. Onward was kind of weak, but like Soul was great. Luca was pretty good. Turning Red looks pretty good too, but they're still making those great movies. And Pixar was also the company that saved you. Pixar saved Disney. And he looks at Pixar and he's like, great, you can make direct to video stuff for Disney Plus. It's like, you don't terrible. Do that to a studio like that. Of course, another thing that might have hurt Disney a lot is that they got rid of Jon Lasseter. And Jon Lasseter, he had his own problems. I'm not saying he didn't. I mean, when he decided to replace Brenda Chapman on Brave for some other guy because the other guy took his notes better. And it's like, Brenda Chapman was one of the directors of The Prince of Egypt. What are you doing? Like, he wasn't perfect, but he still, at the end of the day, understood, like, you need a quality movie, and the theatrical experience is important, and you treat us like an event. Like, you don't, like, he would have never ever let them send stuff to video for free. He understood that, no, if you have a quality product, you have people pay for that product.
Yeah.
And that's what keeps it special.
Yeah. Pixar's initial creation and run of movies, I don't know what they've done for the last 10 years. As far, I've watched some of them, but I don't care as much. Yeah, there was a level of, and you and I used to talk about that a long time ago, that it was like I used to really, really dislike the kind of DreamWorks or Sony kind of like much more commercially bullshit kind of movies they would put out compared to Pixar, at least attempting to do something good. And I think that's still they've attempted to maintain that for the most part. To be like, look, we came up with a random idea and we're going to try to make a movie you've never seen before. It's like, okay, even if the themes are going to be probably familiar, because they tend to do that.
Right.
But yeah, it's an ambitious thing. It's one of the few things to look forward to. It's like Christopher Nolan. Like, does he make great movies all the time? He makes entertaining and interesting movies, even if they're not always fantastic. He's a guy who's like, look, I came up with this idea and it's a weird, interesting idea and I made it. Good. Yeah. You're above the rest.
Yeah. Well, Tenet, like some people highlight as like, well, you see, that shows that even the great ones can fall. And it's like, well, but Tenet wasn't bad. It was just so different. And I also realized that's where people were getting really conditioned, because it's like, Tenet didn't hold your hand. I think Tenet got more rewarding with multiple viewings, where it's like, okay, it really doesn't make any sense the first time, but then the second time through, it makes a little bit more sense, and then it actually makes more sense with each additional viewing. And it's like, wow, it's a shame that movies like this don't do well anymore, because you kind of want movies that reward you for revisiting them.
Yeah, it's to me, it's a lot of it is just you want to have people be able to make, like, as a kid, that the things that inspired me were always, the Spielberg, Lucas, Brian De Palma, random people that just made like original, unique movies that were relatively big budget, important looking movies that people went and saw. And when it all kind of got turned into superhero movies, or all kind of turned into, well, everything you're going to see is a revival of a franchise. It was like, okay, well, I don't want to see this. Right. I'm not interested in this. It's not, I've talked to you about it a million times. I was superheroed out in 2005, 2008, whenever Iron Man came out. And then they were like, look, it's going to be a bunch of these. I'm like, oh God, really? We've already had like X-Men movies. I understand how superheroes work now. And it's just like, yeah, this is it. If you spend that much money, you want to make it back, so you don't take risks.
Yeah.
I mean, you used to. Disney used to a lot. I mean, they still do a little bit, but it's like they made dumb crap like John Carter, or they tried to do something occasionally. Be like, look, we're making this big crazy thing. You got to come see it. And that's what the selling point was. And through the 80s and 90s, the selling point of movies was, here's a crazy thing you've never seen before. Here it is. You got to come see it.
Right.
And eventually it just became, you got to know the next step in the story. And like, well, I don't.
Yeah. Well, the reason that I think the theaters isn't dead is especially because Sony is like one of the only companies, and they're probably going to lead the charge. They're one of the few that realize they can have it both ways. It's like, hey, this doesn't have to be an either or thing. We can have our cake and eat it too. So they've been, I mean, of course they've released Spider-Man, but they've released several movies in theaters that have done pretty well. And yeah, you're going to make money there, and then they're going to go, and they don't have a streaming service. So what are they going to do? They're going to sell it on DVD, and then they're going to license it to a streaming service. And then when that rights expire, they can license it again to them or somewhere else. So they're probably going to be the ones to spearhead the change. And they're the ones who also keep up on the Blu-rays and stuff, like, because people are like, oh, well, sales are way down. It's like, yeah, but like, it's like a 250% markup. Why wouldn't you do it?
Yeah. There's a lot of them. Yeah, there's a whole market for Blu-rays and 4K and that for a lot of specific. I just got the Dead Zone, the David Cronenberg movie on Blu-ray because it was a decent price and I was all excited about it. And some I think Shout Factory or Scream Factory, their subsidiary, made it and do a fancy. Oh, we scan the 2K interpositive. And you're like, oh, okay, well, cool. I'm willing to pay you money for this.
Yep. Exactly. So that it's just going to be interesting to see what happens going forward. Now, another thing that theaters are doing, and they do a very terrible job at letting people know that these exist. But if they did let people know they existed, they'd be much better off. Where they have subscriptions for the theaters now, like like we have AMC and Regal Unlimited over here. I think you have Regal Unlimited over there. You don't really have AMC. But it's like, $23 a month, as many movies as you want. Usually you only have to see 2 movies to make that back. So
yeah.
But that's also like one of the strange thing about theaters is like they've been like the weirdest. They do like the same terrible thing over and over again, but expect different results. Like, we're going to raise our ticket prices because we need to make more money. And it's like, oh, and then attendance drops because you raise the prices. And it's like, oh, well, now we need to raise the ticket prices to make up for that lost income. It's like, and they've been doing this cycle for I don't know how many years. And it was a problem like in 2003 when people were realizing, the DVD is cheaper than going to see it in theaters.
Yeah.
But the studios could still make money on the DVD. Like now it's just really bizarre where it's like, oh yeah, put Black Widow on Disney Plus, where people who would normally pay to see it 3 or 4 times in theaters are now just going to pay to have it once, and then they're just going to rewatch it over and over. In fact, during the pandemic, that was another thing that showed why the Netflix model didn't work when Trolls World Tour went straight to streaming. Although me and my wife, we went to a drive-in theater and we saw it in a theater, so we did our job. But I remember people flipped when it's like $20 for that. It's like, well, yeah, they need to make their money back somehow, and that's true. Yeah. So, Anyway,
what was the last movie? I think the last movie I saw was the terrible Joker movie. When did that come out?
That Joker movie was really good, and by the way, I will not that we're gonna get too much into it, but when you said like how those rich people wouldn't be taking the subway, well, in Chicago and in New York. Yeah, rich people do take those subways sometimes.
Oh, no, they do. But that was a contrived scene. The point of it was to contrive something that normally didn't fit that specific thing. Basically, you've seen that scene 100 times in a movie, and it's always a goofy, terrible, multi-ethnic gang, because that's what they always put in that scene.
Yeah.
And then because they wanted it to be about classism, they made it a bunch of like white guys that worked at a bank, which is stupid. It just doesn't fit. Like that's not the thing. That's not how the rich man screws you. They don't harass you on a train. Like that movie was a lot of surface level stuff with like nothing underneath it.
Well, we totally disagree on that one. I will say, like, if more movies were like superhero, or in this case supervillain movies were like the Joker, I wouldn't complain as much. Unfortunately, most of them are like Avengers.
See, I would have said the Avengers. I didn't watch any of I watched the Avengers, and that was the last one I saw. So 2012 was probably the last. I think I've watched 3 Marvel movies since then. But in general, whenever they're like, hey, do you want to watch this thing? Look, we made a Batman movie, but we put the guy from Twilight on it, and he's going to be mopey. I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm good on that. I'll just rewatch a Batman movie that already exists. I don't want to watch that. Whenever they're like, do you want to see this thing, but we made it super dramatic? And it's like, no, I'll watch a movie that isn't about superheroes then, because that's what those are.
Well, yeah.
There's a whole bunch of other movies that exist that don't have Batman in them. I don't need to watch Batman be mopey.
No, well, I mean, Batman always was mopey. I mean, he basically had his parents was killed, and he basically turned it into like a lifelong pity fest, if you will.
Yeah, that's true. But the idea of the superhero thing, it's like if you were like, oh no, we got to do something to make the X-Men movies more interesting. We're gonna make Wolverine cry more or something. It's like that's not actually interesting. You might think it is.
Except Logan was a great movie, and Matt Reeves did make his reboot of Planet of the Apes was really.
Oh no, the Planet of the Apes movies are probably the only franchise movies where I'm like, you did it.
Well, that guy's making this Batman movie, so that's why I'm like intrigued. It's like, well,
intrigued is probably a good word. It's not like you can't be thrilled, you can't be amazed. It's another Batman movie,
right? I mean, it'll probably be better than Batman v Superman, but
none of them will be as good as the Adam West one.
Yes. No, I say the Batman animated series will never be as good as those.
That's probably true. So that's the thing. Like, you've already done it. It'll be fine. That's what it'll end up being. That's my go-to. It'll be fine. You'll watch it and you'll be like, yeah, some of it was good. Some of it was hokey. They were setting stuff up. It'll be fine.
All right. Well, anyway, folks, we're at the 100-minute mark, and basically the podcast just turned into like a hangout fest for us. But anyway, we do want to hear your feedback on our topics, what you thought about them, and what you thought of the format. Should we have Marco back? We'd love to know. Comment below, like, favorite, share, subscribe, and as always, flame responsibly. Have a good one.